I sometimes find the difference between okay looking sewing, something that you might say, oh, that looks okay, it looks homemade, and something that is really excellent looking. The difference is often not that much, which means that you only need to change or pay attention to a few little things to start having a really big impact on your work. And I have 6 of these little things that you can start paying attention to or stop doing to really enhance the quality of your work coming up in this video. My sewing friends, this is going to be a good one because whilst this is my YouTube channel, we are a community here and we are all brought together for not just the love of sewing, but specifically for us, the love of doing good quality sewing. And I know that we all strive for that, right? We're looking for that beautifully well-crafted garment and we want to keep doing better and better. I know that's why you're here, right? That's what I love doing and why you're here. And that is our community. So before we get into it, let's just decipher a little bit what the difference of, we might say, homemade versus handmade, because these are just words, but it's what we're aiming for when we look at these things, right? When we say homemade, it's sort of more implying something like you would get an answer that would be more likely, oh, well, yes, obviously, I can tell that you made that yourself. Versus we're looking for handmade, that you want the response to be more, wow, you made that yourself? My gosh, right? It's kind of, I hope that helps. The handmade, we mean more highly skilled and crafted. We don't want it to look like it was made in a shop still at home, but handcrafted. There's skill involved. You can, you're wowed at that. It's so good, so beautiful. That is what we're aiming for versus something that maybe, is not as skilled. That's what we're aiming for in the handmade versus homemade sort of words that we've got here. But I think you all know what we're trying to achieve and strive for in the sewing that you do at home. You want it to be the best quality that you can do. As you're a beginner, it's often about things that you skip or you need to stop doing these things. And as you're a bit more advanced, you start paying attention to these things and picking them and doing better on each one. All right, the last one I think is the most underrated one, and we'll get to that at the end. The first one is kind of what to stop skipping pressing or start pressing, and especially press as you go. Now I know heaps of you are going to be like, I've heard this, but have you truly received that message yet? Because I can tell you, when I really understood this, when I first started to press as I go. So meaning you sew a seam, you finish the raw edges, press it, and then you move on to the next step. So every seam is pressed before the next seam, etc. It makes such a difference. And even just pressing the end garment, you don't have to get better at sewing. You just get a little bit better at pressing, or just press for the first time. Your sewing looks at least 100 times better just by having it pressed, and particularly press as you go. If you don't believe me, do the experiment yourself. I promise you will not be disappointed. It really does make such a difference, and you don't need better sewing skills. You just add that pressing quality in there and it just naturally, your garments look so much better. And in particular, as I said, press as you go makes all the difference. It's what I've called the golden rule before. You sew a seam, you finish it, you press it, and then you move on. Next is to either stop skipping or using the wrong interfacing. This one is really hard because as you're starting out, you just don't even know what interfacing is. So you just don't put it in there because you don't have any. You don't realize the impact that it has. And so you start using it, but then you're using the wrong weight, right? And it feels like cardboard, or it's too not stiff enough, or too stiff. And it is this kind of like, which one is right? And of course you only have so many interfacings at home to choose from, but you've got more fabrics than you do interfacings. And yeah, look, I get it. But honestly, it is one of the things you can always tell, say, someone's first garment, so they're using interfacing because it's, and you look back at your own work, right? This is how I knew mine, I'd look back at the first ones that I did and, there was definitely the wrong interfacing, right? We've all had a cardboard interfacing, facing somewhere. That's the wrong choice. You can tell, right? As you get better and better, it's about knowing what one to choose, and your stockpile that you have on hand. That's the biggest key that I think, is to have that stockpile on hand of different types of interfacing, because you only need little bits, and when you need it, and you want the right one. So having a variety of different interfacings at home in your supplies is so handy and so useful. It really improves the quality of your garments. It should look seamless. The right interfacing makes your garments look flawless, and you don't even notice or see the interfacing, right? Great interfacing is completely unseen in the end garment. I love this one. Okay, you need to stop top stitching instead of understitching. Who has not heard of understitching yet? Right? Or if you haven't, I'm going to link down my very favorite video down below on what is understitching. So very quickly, understitching is kind of like a secret sewing technique that's often not explained in sewing instructions, or they might like skip it entirely, or they might tell you how to do it, but it's in this convoluted way. It's like turn over and stitch without saying it's understitching, right? And then you never know that it's a technique. And then you're forever thinking, well, what do I do to sew my facing down? I guess I just have to sew through all the layers, right? And you top stitch it or edge stitch it. And then that's what you do, because that's intuitively the logical thing to do, right? You sew it down so it stays down. But my friends, understitching is what you want to do. If you have a really close look at your clothing, and in particular, if you have the chance to go to stores and look at higher end clothing, you will see understitching all the time, and you didn't realize it was there. And it gives a much more higher quality, more polished, more really, really high-end look to your garments, as opposed to top stitching. Now, they're not always interchangeable. There are reasons you top stitch and not understitch, but things like around facings and necklines and armholes and things like that, I cannot stress enough. Understitching, it is like mind blow moment when you finally like see what it is and realize it's been there the whole time on clothing. And then, of course, now you know how to do it, and you can choose to do it whenever you want and not do top stitching anymore. You can do understitching instead. Okay, the incorrect fabric choice. Oh, it is a big one. I mean, it is one of the surefire ways to make your garments look not just quite right? They're okay, but they're just not as amazing as they could be, because it could have used a different fabric that really suited the design better. We've all been there. We'll still do it. Again, you're always going to choose the wrong fabric choice, but it's about getting better and better. So the more effort you can put into really having a deep dive into fabrics, learning about fibers, about drape, about structure, and understanding these principles so that you can better choose a fabric that is appropriate for your design, and understanding what that design might need. Does it need something structured? Does it need something flowy? Or better yet, what you want in your clothing, because that's how you'll get the clothing you love, is it that you like all the flowy clothes? Do you like it more structured? And figuring that out, the better fabric choices that you make such a big impact to that garment. You've all seen it, right? You see that thing and you're like, wow, because it's the perfect fabric for the perfect design, and it just works, right? And so any amount of time and effort and energy you put into learning fabrics, I promise you will not be like, you will not regret it at all. Seam finishes. Yes, here we are again, always about those seam finishes. It is something to pay particular attention to. Now, these are sometimes on the inside, and you're thinking, well, no one sees the inside. Well, yes, you do. And it's about making clothes that you love for yourself, right? I know for me, if I look on the inside and I'm like, ugh, those seam finishes in there don't really feel nice, right? The whole garment then doesn't feel as nice, and it doesn't look as good to me. And that's what I care about. And I know that's probably what you care about too. So paying particular attention to your seam finishes. When you start, you're just doing your zigzag stitch or your overlock stitch, and that's fine. But start paying attention to, could you do a better looking zigzag or a better looking overlock? Fiddling around with those settings to get the right stitch, like so it's perfect for your fabric that you're working on, right? Spend the time. I know it's scary sometimes on your serger fiddling with it, but it will be worth it. Or having a real paying attention to the fabric that you're using, what we just talked about, and using a more appropriate seam finish for that particular fabric. If it's thick and bulky, you might need a different seam finish, maybe Hong Kong binding or something like that might suit. Or a finer sheer fabric, you might find a felled seam or a French seam is more appropriate for that fabric. And those are the little things that really make your garments start to really stand out, and not just to people looking at your garments, but to other sewists. Like, is that a French seam? Well done. So I've made lots of other videos on different seam finishes, so I'm going to link all those down for you below as well when you're ready to really focus on those. The most under the radar thing to stop doing is stop using your machine on autopilot. What do I mean? All right, we get very much into a rut where we just think, I know how to use my machine, and we just use it, and you just sew and you just forget that understanding and learning your sewing machine is an entire skill by itself. Tweaking the stitch length, tweaking the pressure on the presser foot level for different fabrics, doing all of these little micro adjustments, the little tension dial ever so slightly for the different fabrics require different, all of those different settings, right? Are micro adjustments you can make to make sure the stitches work out perfectly. Take time to learn what your machine can really do. What are all those different stitches on your machine, right? Maybe they're very useful and you can use them. You probably didn't know that your machine has the capability of all of these different stretch type stitches that you can sew with all your knit fabrics now. You can sew on your machine if you take the time to learn them. Potentially your sewing machine came with a bunch of different feet that you're just thinking, what the heck do all of those do? Paying attention to those, having a look, figuring out what they do, and knowing that there are actual different feet and different tools you can use for your machine to make the different jobs better, easier, and you can do so much more with even just a basic machine. And really learning the skill of manipulating and moving the fabric under the machine as you sew. This is something that will always serve you well, in that you can use less and less pins and still get a better and better result because you've learned how to maneuver and ease that fabric in so you don't get puckers, so you can sew around curves real nicely. Just take the time to, one, really learn your machine and stop using it just on autopilot thinking, oh, I'm a master at this. I'm still mastering my sewing machines and getting better and better now because I take that time, and my garments turn out better every time that I learn those new little things. I get a better result. Okay, so it's not just about knowing these things, it's about taking action and applying these things, right? So what does this mean for you? How do we take a deeper dive and hone in so you can make better garments? Take any one of these things. It's now applying it. So not just following your pattern blindly. If your pattern says to top stitch, but you think, I'm going to do understitching instead, you can do that. Maybe there is a more appropriate foot that you can use for your particular fabric that you've got, that you put more choice and effort into selecting in the first place, and doing micro adjustments on your sewing machine, learning that better, not just doing it on autopilot on whatever needle is in your machine with whatever settings, actually working on it to get it exactly for that fabric. If your pattern didn't suggest pressing, but you know to do it as part of the process anyway, taking time to choose the best fabric and best interfacing for that fabric for your project. It's about tackling each one of these in a small step on your next project. And that is my question to you. Which one of these things are you going to work on and really work on enhancing for your next me-made masterpiece that I know that you're working on? I would love to hear it in the comments below. All right, until next time, my sewing friends, happy sewing. Bye.